Hi, I'm Don Rizzo. So how do you guys feel about a world where the dying don't have to suffer? Well, this would be possible with euthanasia, but it is very restricted euthanasia. A couple weeks ago, my roommates were talking about it a little bit, and I didn't know too much about it. So I wanted to learn a little bit more, and I thought this was the perfect opportunity with this speech. I wanted to be able to voice my opinions and say why I thought that way. So what I'm going to do is talk about why I feel that euthanasia should be allowed, but very, very, very strictly, and not just for like any random person on the streets who doesn't feel like living anymore. What I'm going to talk about are a few pros and the arguments against it. First one being the right to die and pro-choice. The next is aspects of the Hippocratic Oath. And lastly, how some think it may eventually become legalized murder. So first, let's start with the right to die. Every day, there's millions of people suffering who are sick and pretty much just delaying the inevitable, and they're eventually going to die. The opposition against letting people die is there's laws against euthanasia currently, and it also violates religious beliefs. A quote from Euthanasia and Assisted Suicide Arguments is, most common religious argument is that the human beings are the sacred creation of God, and that also God should be the only one who chooses when someone dies. The rebuttal to that would be people should not have to suffer and be miserable if they are already going to die. It's not really fair to them, and if they're eventually going to die anyways, we should just let them rest in peace and not let them be miserable for their last years on life. So another aspect that has been greatly debated about euthanasia is with the Hippocratic Oath. The Hippocratic Oath is used as a guideline of ways to practice medicine and to treat patients and to prevent malpractice. The opposition against that is that people are saying that this is meant by people to help heal people and not just give up on them and let them die. The rebuttal for that is the Hippocratic Oath has been modified many times throughout the years for different situations and to be caught up with society. Like at one point the Hippocratic Oath said that women weren't allowed to practice medicine, and that clearly doesn't go well with today's society. So lastly, what some people think this might escalate to, and their main problem with euthanasia, is that they think it'll become legalized murder. I feel that it could be used under strict conditions to help people that are suffering, but it has to be watched and monitored very closely, because you can't just allow just random people to be killed just because they don't like their life. The main argument against this is that people believe it'll be a slippery slope into legalized murder. And according to the arguments against euthanasia, legalized euthanasia would most likely progress to the stage where people at a certain point would be expected to volunteer to be killed, meaning like people who are getting older or very sick. It may become too expensive for people to afford, so they should just volunteer to end their lives to make it better for everybody else, when really they're not suffering, they're doing all right, and there's a chance for them to recover. The rebuttal against this is that there's really not any evidence to prove that this would definitely happen, where just they would be killing everybody, or even that it could be taken the wrong way and people just start killing people and using euthanasia as a legal way to kill people. And Raymond G. Frey said that we need evidence that shows that horrible slope consequences are likely to occur. Just because there's a possibility of it happening is not good enough to constitute the evidence that it will happen. So until there's like evidence to prove that it will happen, you can't just assume that people will misuse the euthanasia to just kill everybody off or kill people that they don't like, or any negative impact that it could have. So to wrap everything up, the three main points that I was trying to make were that people should have the right to choose if they want to live or die, mostly just for people who are suffering, not just random people like I've been saying. It has to be very strictly watched. And also the modification of the Hippocratic Oath to fit the times, and how when times changed, there has to be modifications to it. And it can be used not to just give up on people, but to like let them rest in peace and make their last few moments of life a lot less peaceful and not so terrible and suffering. And I believe that it could be beneficial if it is strictly regulated. Like I see in the future, it could be possible to let people die when it's necessary and not just make them prolong life if they have no hope of surviving. They're going to die anyways. I think it could be very beneficial because people can be remembered for their better days and not have to be seen in their worst stages of their life being miserable and suffering. So I just want to end by saying, like I said this whole time, it can be beneficial, but it must be very strictly watched so that way there's no malpractice. It's not used to kill off anybody or just used as a scapegoat. It has to be watched, but I do believe it can be beneficial.